Okay, you guys, this is Biology Unit 9, Segment 4, Video Notes. This segment is Biodiversity, and it covers Chapter 6. So biodiversity is the sum total of the genetically based variety of all organisms in the biosphere. There are actually 3 types of biodiversity: ecosystems, species, and genetic diversity. With the ecosystem, remember that's a level of organization. We're looking at a variety of habitats and overall communities within those ecosystems. Species diversity, you're going to have a lot of different species, whatever the number of different species in that area or area of study. And then genetic diversity, we've talked about genes and DNA, but this would be all the forms of genetic information carried by all the different organisms, so almost like a gene pool. But why is biodiversity important? And actually a lot of activities that we're going to do in class will pertain to this. And there's a very big question on the unit test about this. So biodiversity is very important. Having a variety of species, genetics, and communities, ecosystem, is important for ethical reasons. By protecting future generations, we're able to work together. Having that variety is for cultural importance for indigenous people as well. It's important to keep the environment pristine. We want to keep the organisms around. We don't want them to go extinct because of ethical reasons. Okay? Ecological. When we have a large variety of life, okay, we actually can see stability. So if we see the loss of a keystone species, this would be a critical species, then it actually trickles through that food web and can have vast impact. So ecological, large-scale, biological impact in the area. It can disrupt nutrient and water cycling that's happening in nature, and ecologically speaking, a loss in biodiversity can also include habitat loss. It could be one of the reasons why we would lose the biodiversity. It also has economic importance. Having a very diverse area is attractive to people to come and see. There's conservation jobs that are wrapped around keeping biodiversity alive. And then when we look at the medicines and resources that we can gain from looking at very diverse areas, for example, the tropical rainforest is one of our biggest biodiverse areas on the planet, as well as coral reef. And we're still in the process of examining all the genetic pool that's available, and we're actually obtaining new medicines from the genetics of organisms that live there. So if they go extinct, if they are not as diverse, then we lose that economic value. There's also aesthetic values, just the appreciation for having a variety of species, especially some of the exotic species that get a lot of attention by humans. Artists are inspired by the beauty of variety. So ethical, ecological, economic, and aesthetic. But what are the threats? So humans are a big threat. Altered habitat, the more we develop, the more we develop areas to meet human needs, the more chunked the forests become, for example, or the areas, the wildlife areas. They just become chunked, and that's called habitat fragmentation. And instead of having a big area in which, top predators can have lots of habitat, we end up chunking out, having breaks where the animals can't get across, for example, big highway systems or literally cities, just making it more chunked. So you're not going to have your large predators because they require too large of a habitat to cover, and it also trickles down the food web as well. You take out the plants, you're going to take out the energy available to the next trophic levels. So humans altering the habitat construction clear cutting, farming, and doing those things is leading to that fragmentation, which is breaking down the ability for the ecosystem to have a high carrying capacity for some of the larger predators and even the smaller, lower trophic levels. Human demand for wildlife products, example ivory, example chinchilla fur, example exotic animal skins and that kind of stuff, really does threaten biodiversity because there's a lot of poaching and a lot of illegal activity that takes place, and as a result, it is any kind of efforts to protect some of these endangered species really is for naught when you have all of this illegal activity going on to try to harvest some of these products. Pollution, I mean, there's a lot of examples of pollution which can hinder or harm the ecosystem and the life that lives there. But DDT is an example. It's a pesticide that was used in the 70s, and it actually was accumulating in the food web, and there is a bird of prey that was being impacted because the DDT was accumulating in such high amounts that it was impacting the egg. The actual covering of the egg was becoming too thin, and so these eggs were not able to, they were too fragile and they wouldn't make it until hatching. So there was a big decline in the population of these birds of prey. And then introduced species we also called invasive species, okay? You're going to learn more about these, but as human beings, purposely and accidentally, we have introduced species into new species into areas in which there's no predators for them, and so then they grow like crazy because there's none of those selective pressures to keep them in check. There's no limiting factors for them that keep them in check, so they grow like crazy, and they can really play havoc on the food web, wiping out whole trophic levels. Biomagnification is a term you're going to need to know, and it's the process in which chemical substances become more concentrated at each trophic level. Okay, so there's kind of a little bit what, like I was talking about the DDT. It just accumulates. So if you picture a food web in a pond, you've got plant life and algae starting us off, okay? And then maybe insects are eating the plants, and then small fish eat the insects, and then large fish eat the small fish. Well, if there's a toxin that gets in the water and gets in the plants, the insects are going to eat a lot of plants. Remember, only 10% of the energy goes to the next level, so they're going to eat a lot of plants. The insects may be still okay with their concentration of toxin in their bodies, but it's going to accumulate in their fatty tissue. And then small fish eat those insects. They eat a whole bunch of insects, and then you've got even more accumulating in those. And then how many small fish do the large fish eat? Even more. So they've got to have, so it just accumulates. That's called biomagnification. The causes are toxic chemicals released in the environment. The toxic chemicals don't break down. If they do, then they're not an issue. The toxic chemicals are fat soluble, so they build up in the fatty tissue of the organisms, and then on up through their trophic levels, it accumulates. The consequence, though, is that organisms highest up on the food chain or highest on the pyramid, they're going to be harmed by these toxic chemicals because they're going to reach a very concentrated level. So they're going to start wiping out your top dogs, okay, which then trickles through down the food web and allows all these other organisms to fluctuate in their numbers. Here's a great representation, and I put it in your notes. It's kind of an upside down pyramid here. When we learned about the pyramid of numbers and the pyramid of biomass, we learned that the bottom trophic level actually had the most biomass and the most number of organisms. Well, here you're going to have, this is the skinny little line is illustrating the tiny amount of DDT that's available at that level. Those zooplankton that are going to eat this trophic level, they're going to increase, because they're eating so much, they're going to increase the concentration here at this level. And then the small fish eat those, and now you've got an even bigger level. Bigger fish eat those, and now you've got an even more concentrated DDT. And look at the amount of DDT that's present then in the osprey. Too much. The eggs don't develop properly, and so we see a big decline in the osprey. So it's kind of like an opposite pyramid. Invasive species is another way that we impact biodiversity by accidentally or purposely introducing a species into an area, they usually, if it's truly an invasive species, it's going to outcompete the native species, okay, which disrupts the normal harmony happening in that community. And there usually there's no natural predators, and they can reproduce fast. So I would say if you're going to describe an invasive species, you would say it outcompetes native, it has no natural predators, and it can reproduce very fast. And the cause, what it causes is ecological and economic damage, and they have to be taken care of. What we're looking at is, I think it's called kudzu, and that's a vine that literally just swamps out other plants. This is the zebra mussel, and they're a little like a clam. It's a mussel, but it's a clam, got a shell, and they pile up on each other. And then I think this is a cane toad, but they were introduced to take care of a species, and then yet there was no predators for them, so they reproduced like crazy. Invasives can be invasive. Zebra mussel, you do need to know a little bit about this. These maps are showing kind of what it used to be in '89 and what it is now. The incidence of zebra mussel, it's gone rampant. This is a close-up of the zebra mussel, so you can kind of see how it looks. And then they pile up on each other on anything and everything that's in the water. They're native to Russia. It was transported to the United States and other countries in the ballast water of tankers, so ships. When they were emptied to for buoyancy, they would then deposit, with the water came the zebra mussels, so they were emptying them out. It will block sewers, water supplies, and it actually causes millions of dollars of damage because of it. So overall impact of invasive species, you have interspecific competition. There's new species that outcompete the native for resources, and they're forced out of their niches. Zebra mussels is a beautiful example of that. Predation, the alien species are predators of the native species. They prey. Species decline rapidly because they can't adapt fast enough to the new predator. Cane toad is an example of that. The species extinction, they outcompete, or they occur due to hybridization that outcompetes the native species. Hybrid species replace the native species. A great example is the cichlids are extinct due to the introduction of Nile perch in Lake Victoria. And then you have the extinction. This is the total disappearance of all or part of its range, or endangered. So extinction or endangerment is a classification. Endangered is a population size that's declining and is in danger of extinction. And that's it, guys.